Council to order. Welcome to our virtual general committee meeting. Of course, the distancing requirements, we are meeting remotely. I have the city clerk, Wendy Cook, in the chambers with me. She's about 20 feet away, so we've got lots of distance. Just a reminder that if you do want to speak, if you can just indicate by raising your hand, then I'll keep a speakers list for our items. We may need to mute you to address sound issues. Ryan is handling that for us on this Zoom meeting. And if you happen to have to drop off and come back on by phone, just a reminder that you need to mute if you're not speaking. And if we do lose anybody for any reason, we will try and get you back. So if there is that concern, we did have that issue on the county council meeting yesterday morning, but this has worked very well for us here in Barrie. So if you could just show of hands if you wish to speak, and other than that, we will proceed with our meeting. The first item on the agenda tonight is the consent agenda. Please hold the item if you wish it discussed for tonight. If the item is not held, it goes forward on consent. We just have the one staff report, property tax and water and wastewater considerations, COVID-19. Councillor Harvey,
hold,
is
please.
it? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Saw several hands there. Councillor Harvey, you held that. We will discuss that after the presentation tonight. We have one presentation on the agenda, and that is from our CAO, Michael Prose, concerning a COVID-19 update. Mr. Prose, over to you. Sorry, we're just trying to get State House unmuted there.
Can you say my audio is low? You were muted.
Okay, Mike, I think you're good to go now.
You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Lehman and members of council. This is, I believe, the third presentation that I have I'm providing to council and to the public. My intention is to hopefully make this a little bit of a shorter one and start to deliver to you some of the things that have changed since my last presentation, which has effectively been just about a week. And Ryan, maybe you could take us past the agenda to the next page. Thank you very much. I wanted to provide an overview of the current status for members of council and for the public. We have 165 confirmed cases of COVID-19, including 70 that have recovered. We have 12 hospitalizations, 11 deaths in Simcoe, in Muskoka District Health Unit area. We continue to see evidence of community transmission, that being the spreading of the virus from person to person, no longer specifically related to travel. The local cases are increasing and are expected to over the next days and coming weeks. I think it's important for members of council to message and for the public to be aware of. There are some misconceptions. This is not just a disease affecting the elderly. Most of our cases are among adults between the ages of 35 and 64 years of age. I would note for the public and members of council, the Royal Victoria Hospital continues to message that they are critically low on masks and they are still seeking donations of masks, potentially from the public or their mask suppliers. The donations are continued to be filtered through the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, but they would certainly be open and well receiving of any opportunity to donate masks to the RVH. I think members of council, if there was one takeaway, and I discussed this with Mayor Lehman this afternoon, if there was one message that I wanted to leave you and the public with, it is the importance of not being lulled into a false sense of complacency. What appears right now, I think, across the spectrum is there seems to be fairly low activity. We're fortunate for that, but the reality is there's a lot of planning and activities that are happening behind the scenes. And I am concerned, and I think the team is concerned, that this sense of complacency is not going to serve us in the long run. The community needs vigilance now, probably more than ever. Lowering our guard at this time literally could have fatal implications. We really need the community to continue to come together, to adhere to the physical distancing, to adhere to the emergency orders, both in the city of Barrie and from the province. And in doing this, we know we can not only flatten the curve, but bust the curve completely. But we are going to need everybody together in that moving forward. I liken the activities that the public may not actually be seeing. If I can use the analogy of ducks swimming on a pond. The reality is when you look at those ducks, they seem very serene and tranquil with very little activity. And the reality is the legs are pedaling madly underneath the water. And that's what's happening in our community through all of the first responders, through the healthcare providers, through your emergency control operations group, through the county, and all of the different social services that are at play. There is just a plethora of activity that's going on behind the scenes as we plan and adjust and prepare for this. And I wouldn't want the public to be left with the perception that because there aren't these massive headlines that perhaps things are better now and we can not be vigilant and we can take less care. Now is the critical time to flatten the curve. Next slide, please, Ron. I wanted to update members of council and the public that we will be moving to cancel special events up to and including June 30th. As well as previously noted, the beaches are closed. We are moving to ban yard sales based on the recommendations and feedback of the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit. And so the people are sort of understanding of where we sit in the process. Upcoming, we need to start planning for when this starts to subside. And it's important that the public and members of council understand that things such as day camps, we can't just simply turn a switch. They take 4 or 5 weeks to provide ramp up and bring on staff to prepare for those. I think based on the indications we've seen from the province, any sort of reactivation of the economy, any sort of reactivation in our community is going to be planful, which is good. And I think will be communicated in advance, which will allow us to make sure that we are staffing at the appropriate levels to provide the appropriate level of service. I'll note on the, for camp registrations, I would call out that last year at this time, we had over 6,000 camp registrations, and to date, we have about 2,500. So I think there is no question that our residents are taking a wait and see approach to camps, and that is probably very sound judgment. And we are also seeing some cancellations of previously reserved positions. Next slide, please. Under the enforcement, as previously noted, we had set up several weeks ago an enforcement hotline at 705-739-4241 or email at enforcement.services@barrie.ca. And by way of activities for the week from April 7th to April 13th, I can report that we had 745 instances. 512 came from routine patrols, of which 436 were found to have no violation. We had 76 violations, including dog off leash, children playing on playground equipment, and unrelated to COVID, smoking violations. We received 95 emails and 29 phone calls, which were coded as general inquiries. By way of complaints, we received broken down 49 related to gatherings, 23 regarding use of park equipment, 22 related to businesses operating outside the emergency order, and 15 related to the physical or social distancing or a violation of that. In all of these cases, we received voluntary compliance. We did note that there are some businesses that have measures in place, but in fact, the patrons aren't always following those measures, and that is creating anxiety in the community, and in some cases, it is driving complaints. Since March 16th, we've received 1,386 inquiries or complaints through the new hotline. Financial impacts, next slide, please. Thanks, Ryan. Members of council, I thought this might be a good opportunity, and I know the mayor has touched on this in the past, but Last week, as I talked about the financial impact that the city is starting to do some modeling on, received a lot of questions around the difference between debt and deficit. And at the risk of repeating, I would take just 30 seconds of your time and tell you that the difference between debt and deficit. Debt is when a municipality borrows for larger or longer term projects that benefit not only today's residents, but future residents as well. It's really similar to a household taking on a mortgage with a specific start and end date when it's paid off. A deficit is when expenditures exceed any revenues from taxes or user fees. This should be seen as similar to using your line of credit or your credit card to pay your daily needs or to buy groceries. This is unsustainable, and it creates a further and future burden to our residents. Municipalities, by legislation, are not permitted to run a deficit. It is, in fact, one of the great strengths of the municipal system. This means each and every year, we have to balance our fiscal books. Next slide, please. Around city staffing changes, I wanted to note that there has been some discussion around some of the great measures that the federal government has pushed out to the private sector in order to retain employees or to offset some of the cost of employees. I think it's important to note for members of council who are aware, but certainly for the broader public, municipalities are not eligible for this emergency funding relief that has been offered to the private sector. As a result of that, we've had to, as you know, initiate a series of layoffs in the past. Most recently, we have addressed the issue of our summer students and co-op students and our seasonal staff. And in those cases, we have either rescinded in 108 instances or delayed in 326 instances those offers of employment. The difficult decisions around layoffs have previously been communicated to council and certainly to the broader public. But it is worth noting that further layoffs are contemplated based on our assessment of the key service and our resources availability. As part of this, it's important that members of council and the public are aware that when we return or start to return to what would be considered normal, there will be a required ramp up of our staffing and our service levels. We will continue to maintain our core and minimum service levels, but as the temperature warms up and we hope to return to our new normal, there will be a bit of a lag as we bring on the additional staff required and return all of our facilities and our fields and all of our venues and amenities back to the pristine state that the public has come to expect. Communications. Thank you, Ryan. In addition to previous communications provided to members of council and the public, just last week we launched the virtual Easter egg hunt that I had talked about last week. In addition, we deployed an additional 10 of the Curbex signs placed along our waterfront, encouraging our residents to maintain the physical distancing and to stay home wherever possible. We issued a guide to safe outdoor activities during COVID-19, and we extended our ads on radio stations and online news website. We also issued media releases related to the marina and boat launch closures, as well as the Easter egg hunt. Next slide, please. And members of council, I'm not sure I'd be doing my job if I didn't look for some good news to share with you, because at these times it's always important. So under the good news category, I wanted to share with you that the library has actually issued an additional 500 library cards for those who are at home. They're taking advantage of many of the services the library provides online, and that's tremendous. In addition, as you will be aware, just recently Electra announced that they are waiving the late payment charges for all residential and small commercial customers effective April 15th for a 60-day period. And as it relates to social services, I provided some information to members of council directly last week, but I think it's worth noting that the County of Simcoe received approximately $4 million from the federal and provincial government to aid with the care of the vulnerable population throughout Simcoe County, but certainly in the city of Barrie as well. Next slide, please, Ron. Potential emerging matters, members of council. I spoke about this, but I want to make sure that everybody has some line of sight. Part of the core service review that we're doing and the decisions that we'll make will result in a reduced level of service in our city parks. We will maintain our minimum level of service, and we will provide our core services across the community. but for the time being, there will be a visual reduced level of service in city parks. Next slide, please. Thank you. Members of committee will obviously be aware that there's a staff report in front of you tonight. As part of it, it is staff's recommendation to provide an extension of payment periods for water and wastewater bills. And we're recommending a 3% rate decrease from May to December 31st, 2020. As part of that, it would be, I would want to provide my reminder that we expect that we will have approximately $60 million less in cash projected by the end of the year, based on estimates of those unable to pay or delayed in paying their property taxes, water and wastewater bills, as well as the lost revenues we have previously itemized for members of council. Final slide. And members of council, that this concludes my report, and I'd be happy to take questions either now or at inquiries.
Thanks very much, CAO Prowse. Members of General Committee, do you have any questions on the presentation? Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you, CAO Prowse, for the update. I've been seeing over the last week or so, a lot of places around the world, a lot of cities and towns around the world reevaluate how roads and sidewalks are used. And I'm wondering if the emergency control group has thought of creating maybe temporary wider sidewalks or temporary bike lanes to allow for greater physical distancing.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Aylwin, through Mayor Lehman to yourself. Certainly the emergency control group has looked at that, looked at some versions of that. I think I would suggest it's still an open switch. Some of the alternatives we did already model was the idea of some additional road closures that might provide some additional space. One of the good news that has come out of this situation is the additional road work that we've been able to expedite, as members of council would know. The flip side of that is it does constrict your ability to respond with emergency services. So we are cognizant of that. And trying to make sure that we are balancing the needs of the community for potentially the additional space with the ability to ensure that we've got adequate roads to respond to emergency services. So my short answer would be that it's still an open switch, and we do continue to look at that. If you have specific ideas, I'd be happy to present those to the emergency control group and have a discussion about them.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Aylwin. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to CEO Prowse. You spoke about doing less work in the parks. What are you expecting that that's going to involve? Are we going to let parks naturalize to a large extent, or what are you thinking in that?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Riepma. Thank you for the question. I think by way of specifics, I'd be happy to provide separate cover to council so they've got that. But I think when we talk around the reduction, if I could use a couple of examples, our sports fields require a tremendous amount of work. And currently, at this pace, at least, they're not going to be utilized even as things start to warm up. So that would obviously be a level of service that we would draw that right down to the minimum. We're going to have to make some decisions, as I articulated last week, around our seasonal washrooms. Again, they require a fair amount of maintenance to maintain them in a clean and usable manner. And we're going to have to make a decision on if and when we open those and how those are maintained. So there's a bunch of, I would say, smaller types of items that can have a fairly high profile. But by way of grooming and maintenance for the parks themselves, it's our expectation that we will maintain those in a very usable and clean manner for our residents. You probably would see less flowers. You would not see unsafe trails, is the way I would describe it. But I'd be very happy to have the parks team put together their bullet points around impacts, and we can share that with members of council, so you've got some pretty good visibility to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Riepma. Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you, CEO Prowse. just had a question. I don't know, others may be interested in those watching. You mentioned the $4 million that came from the collective efforts of the provincial and federal government for the vulnerable populations. Would you be able to give a little more detail on both how the money is distributed and how they define vulnerable populations, and does that include seniors?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Harris. Through Mayor Lehman to you. I would actually probably punt on that to Mayor Lehman or a member of the Human Services Committee. That funding is allocated and delivered through the county. So while I can share some of the good news with you, I don't have the specifics on it. Mayor Lehman, I don't know if that's something that you have information on that you could share.
Yeah, why don't I say a bit, and then Barry or Anne-Marie can kick in. So the county council met remotely yesterday in the morning. The staff report that was presented about the $4 million outlined the kinds of things they were going to spend it on, but not the allocations to specific organizations. They're not there yet. But the commitment from county staff was that the money would be flowing in, I would say, days, not weeks. The kinds of things they are going to spend it on are supports for our homeless shelter system, specifically staffing costs, transportation costs, food costs, if any, although there's been in all of the towns and cities in Simcoe, there's been a real grassroots effort to support shelters. Food is one of the ways that Barrie and other communities, they've just been receiving a lot of help. But anyway, additional costs related to the move into hotels and motels for shelters. There is additional money for vulnerable individuals by way of top-ups to some of the social service payments as well, which would be direct through the social service system. The violence against women shelters are going to be eligible for this funding, which is a difference that traditionally the homelessness prevention funding they were not eligible for, but they are for part of this which is really good news for the women's shelter in Barrie. I think the seniors are only covered in the sense of the support through social service programs, Councillor Harris. I don't believe I think this, because this is CHIPPY funding, community homelessness prevention top-up funding, the primary purpose, I think, is the social services, the charities, the Salvation Army, the Lighthouse in Aurelia, the Busby Center in Barrie, and so forth. So to the extent that there are some programs that serve seniors in need, in financial need, I believe there's some eligibility there for the funding, but the primary purpose here appears to be going to the homeless shelters. Barry, Councillor Deputy Mayor Ward, anything you would add to that?
Just that that's a good summary, and there's half the funding's from the federal government, half it's from the province roughly, and it's 4 different things. It's slightly different focus of each of the funding. I will actually forward you the staff report to everybody on council, so take a look. I'll just send you the staff report. There's a lot of appendices which I won't bother, but you'll get a good summary from the staff report. But as the mayor says, it's yet to be seen where exactly the money will be going, because they're going to have to that'll be coming to find out where the demand is in the coming weeks.
Councillor Kungle, did we get that about right? Anything you'd add?
No, that's great. Thank you. I was just actually pulling up the report. So I think it'll be a beautiful resource. Deputy Mayor Ward will circulate, and happy to supplement that. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Councillor Harris.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lehman and Deputy Mayor Ward and Councillor Congo. I just hopeful, I think whereas we see this crisis evolving, hopefully there'll be some funding to help seniors, senior homes, LTC, those kind of things. But thank you for the report on the money that's been invested so far. It's much appreciated.
Thanks for that, Councillor Harris. Any other questions for our CAO on the presentation? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Prose, well, I'm actually going to ask you one from a couple of rooms away here. I know there is, there's a lot of sort of speculation out there as to what the, process of opening up looks like, and you've been, I think, very right in your presentation to caution against any notion that we've even perhaps hit the surge point yet. So perhaps you could just share what's being shared with the emergency control group with regards to the sort of timing. Is the obviously we know social distancing is working, but behind the scenes you described the ducks paddling underwater. That work continues because there is still an anticipation that that there could be more difficult days ahead. Is that correct? Is that the message we need to get out?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to you on the question. Thank you very much. So certainly by district, I think there certainly is different modeling that takes place. I would say generally, subject to correction from the health unit, because this certainly is a fluid situation. Probably the first to second week of May is generally when they expect what they describe as the surge. That probably changes on a day-to-day basis. But I think for many of our residents, they think that we are in the surge right now. The modeling and the advice we've received is that is not the case. We are in the point of critical potential contamination right now, but not necessarily in the surge.
Okay, thanks very much for that, and thank you for the presentation.
Very well.
Members of General Committee will move to the single staff report that was on the agenda tonight. The property tax, water and wastewater considerations. Councillor Harvey, did you want to kick off?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll put the matter on the floor as printed, and I do have an amendment. And the amendment reads to replace B with the following. Subsection 1, that staff implement a needs-based program for residential customers that eliminates the fixed rate charge for water and wastewater on their next bi-monthly bill through an online application form that requires customers to attest to financial hardship caused by COVID-19. Subsection 2, that staff include a requirement in the attestation that landlords pass the water bill relief onto tenants if water charges are included in the rent paid by tenants. Subsection 3, that the revenue loss resulting from this program be funded equally from the electric dividends, water rate stabilization reserve, and the wastewater rate stabilization reserve up to a cap of $2 million in total, and that this amount be transferred at the conclusion of the program to the water and wastewater capital reserves. And subsection 4, that staff work with business organizations such as the Downtown Barrie BIA and the Chamber of Commerce to investigate potential mechanisms for water bill relief for small businesses closed by the Ontario Non-Essential Businesses Emergency Order.
Okay, in this virtual world, I know we've had to circulate that, and there isn't a paper that gets passed around. But on the amendment, Councillor Harvey, would you care to speak to that?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. Obviously, we're in extraordinary times, and since COVID-19 began here in Canada almost 2 months ago, we've gone from initial layoffs due to the loss of business to the initial list of businesses that were released by the province to a much more extensive closures when the list was expanded. Through expanded closures, we've seen a dramatic increase in the volume of businesses that are closed, and our streets have become somewhat of a ghost town compared to the normal volume that we're used to seeing. As a result of a record number of people filing across the country for EI and the federal CERB benefit due to being laid off, there's extraordinary times we'll probably never ever see in our lifetime again, and this is being called a once-in-a-century event by health experts. As a municipality, we're limited in what type of financial relief that we can provide to our residents. Last week, we approved additional garbage tags, and this week we're proposing to provide some relief on the water bills to those that have been negatively impacted by COVID-19 and experience financial hardship. The $2,000 CERB benefit is a quick stimulus that offers taxpayers some quick money. However, they're going to have to pay income tax on that at the end of the year. So it's truly not a $2,000 injection at the end of the day. This fixed water rate relief is meant to provide assistance to those that require it and meet the requirements as set out by this amendment and staff. This is meant to be a one-time injection into our local economy to help individuals and families that are in need of assistance. Although $2 million is being set aside for this, which is in line with the staff report, I do not anticipate that will require that amount of funding to continue this program. The $2 million would allow for up to 30,427 customers to apply. However, I cannot imagine that we will even come close to that volume of applicants. This relief will complement the province's already frozen hydro rates for peak hours, our free transit that's been provided, and the late fees that have been waived by Electra for hydro bills and the city's water bills. This initiative is being funded by our reserves and dividends that we receive from the city's partial ownership of Electra, which in reality are funds that the city makes from selling hydro to its residents. Although the funding per household is small, for some, this could mean a week's groceries or several bags of milk for their family. This is a one-time injection to our residential customers and into our local economy. And obviously, eventually, we would like to see something moving forward when it comes to assisting our small and medium-sized businesses, as I've heard from several of them that they're hurting and there's being some pressure put on them by their landlords to pay up, or else they were going to lock out. However, I couldn't imagine that there's going to be too many other businesses in line wanting to fill these commercial units if that ever did become reality. I don't know if you want to add any more to it, Your Worship, or if you wanted to save your words for the end.
Yeah, I'll open the floor to comments on the amendment. Those who wish to speak to the amendment. Councillor McCann. Oh, sorry, Councillor. Oh, there we go. You were muted there. Sorry, Mike. If you could start again.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I've given this a great deal of thought, and I'm going to be looking to refer this. And the reasons why is I do understand that as council members, as community leaders, we want to do what's best for our community. We want to do what's best for this COVID-19. But I can't help but look at the numbers, and they just don't add up. For every resident here in Barrie, this cost savings is going to be about $1 a day, right? At a cost of $2 million to the city, up to $2 million. And I'm just not hearing this from any residents. And I reached out to the majority of council, and they haven't heard one resident talk about the water bill. So maybe I'll ask you yourself, Mayor Lehman, how many people have talked to you about their water bill and have wanting to reduce the bill?
Thanks, Councillor McCann. I wouldn't say more than a handful.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought. And maybe I'll ask through you, Mayor Lehman, Ms. James Reed, to maybe do some stats on how many people in the past 30 days have actually called and inquired about their water bill, and if she has it, comparing it to 2019.
Ms. James Reed.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor McCann. Thank you for the question. Service Barrie has been receiving water bill reduction questions, but they certainly haven't been overwhelmed. We currently rely on manual tracking, so I do have some limited information for you. In the past 30 days for emails, we have received 38 emails that are directly related to penalty or rate reduction inquiries about water-related items. And in terms of phone calls, unfortunately, we didn't track to that level of detail, but we do have a year-over-year comparison. So in 2019 to 2020, if you look at the last 30 days, we are actually seeing 100 less calls per week from the year-over-year with respect to specific water-related issues. And that's unfortunately all I have right now in terms of our data. As you know, we are still implementing our citizen engagement management software. And once we have that, we'll be able to get a lot more finite information.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I appreciate you having those numbers. So just so I have it clear, you've had about 38 people in the past 30 days inquire about a reduction in their water bill, correct?
38 by email.
Sure.
And then I can't track by phone, except that I do have the information that we've had 100 less calls week to
Right.
week when we look at a comparison for the last 30 days on
Yeah,
water.
So thank you, Ms. Reed, for that. So we've actually had less calls in 2020 under this crisis than we had in 2019. So I find that really odd, which just kind of emphasizes and strengthens my case on wanting to refer this over to staff to get more information. You know, I do believe that we do need more information. We need a greater understanding of this crisis and the impact it's going to have to our city. I had a call with Mr. Miller this morning, and it wasn't a very satisfying call because there's just a lot of questions right now with very little answers, right? And we don't know what the housing market is going to happen. We don't know the financial impact or social impact this crisis is going to have on us in 60 days. But I can say with a great deal of confidence that we'll have a heck of a lot more information. And I believe, you know, with the potential of spending $2 million today to help our residents with $1 a day payment on their water bill is not the best choice of spending our money. So maybe I'll read my amendment and see how council feels. So that staff reports F1 FIN 003 2020 concerning the property tax and water and wastewater considerations, COVID-19, be referred back to staff in the finance department to report back to general committee on this matter once more information has how the impact of COVID-19 is realized.
Okay, Councillor McCann, was that intended as an amendment to Councillor Harvey's amendment?
It was
Or an alternative?
an alternative, sorry.
Yeah, so with the amendment that's on the floor, appreciate your views. Maybe we can deal with Councillor Harvey's amendment, and then if that fails, you're welcome to move yours.
Okay, that's procedure.
Okay. Councillor Riepma, I have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, I want to say thanks to staff and to Councillor Harvey and yourself, who put a lot of work into this one. I have to say, I am in support of the A part of the staff recommendation on the extension of the payment periods, because I think that's really helpful to people who are struggling. If they can't afford to pay their bill this month, give them a break and don't charge them the interest and let them pay it next month or the next time that they can. That, I think, is really helpful. The B part of the motion that's before us, I can't support. I think, like Councillor McCann, it's not a significant amount that we're proposing, and yet at the same time, it is significant for us. We saw in CAO Prouse's presentation that we're going to be $60 million short this year if this keeps up. I'm really reluctant to make it 62 million. I think that's problematic. I think as well that as the B part is structured right now, is that it while it's targeting to some degree, I'm not sure that it is going to really get to the people that we really want to get to. For example, I don't think we can force landlords to pay to pass this on to their tenants, even though they may want to say that they do. We don't have any control over that. So I'm very concerned about that. The other part of it is that I would prefer that if we're going to spend any money, that it come only from the wastewater and water capital reserves, and not the community benefit plan reserve. The difficulty is that it's money that we have, but we can only spend it once. And it seems to me that in 60 days or in 90 days, we will have a much better idea of what the public needs and what we really need to do. It seems to me that that's what the staff are saying in the report as well, that it's early days. They don't know what the best approach is. They've suggested 3% across the board, which I think is kind of like, well, let's sprinkle a little bit around, but it isn't going to, in my view, accomplish anything for the vast majority of people. Now, I don't want to be the Grinch of Christmas, but it seems to me that yes, there are going to be a few families that will definitely be helped by $60 in 2 months, and there will be some, but I think that it's not a wise expenditure of our limited funds. I did, Mr. Mayor, like your suggestion that you made earlier today in an email that those of us that sit on the county social services committee, that we should really connect with staff and try to make some progress on that extra $4 million that they've just received. And Deputy Mayor Ward has volunteered to start that off. And I think that's probably a much better expenditure of our time and effort than what is being proposed in B part here. So I'm heartily in support of A, but not B. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ritma. I have Councillor Thompson and others who wish to speak. If you could just show your hands. Sorry, Rob. Deputy Mayor Ward. And sorry, just keep your hands up for a second, folks. And I'll speakers list. Deputy Mayor Ward, you're next.
Okay, took me a second. You can hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, something that Councillor Ritma mentioned, and whether you're in favor of this amendment or not, I was hoping that I agree with him that the money should not be coming from the Electra dividend. It should be, we should keep it whole. It's actually not just a tradition. We are required by law to have wastewater pay for itself. We're not allowed to take profits from it to lower the tax rate. We're not allowed to vice versa use the tax rate to subsidize water rates. And I know this is money from Electra, but I still think a principle is good and that we should. So my amendment would be to remove the words Electra dividends from paragraph 3. So my amendment to the amendment is to remove Electra dividends from paragraph 3. And like I said, this isn't part of the argument of whether we'll accept this whole thing, but if it does go through, I'd like to make clear that it should not include the Electra dividends. Those are meant for something else.
Okay, so that is an amendment to this amendment, to Councillor Harvey's amendment, and it is to remove the words Electra dividends from the paragraph identifying the funding sources. So on the amendment to the amendment, I did see some nodding around the table, which you get to see more easily on Zoom. Who would wish to speak to this? Councillor Owen, did I see your hand on the amendment to the amendment? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward, for bringing this amendment forward. That was a major concern of mine as well. The community benefit reserve, we have discretion as council to decide how that money is spent, but we can't spend the money that's in the water and wastewater stabilization reserves on anything we want. So I think it would be prudent for us to take only from the water and wastewater rate stabilization reserves, and then leave the community benefit reserve intact, because we don't know what the issues are going to be down the road as this pandemic plays out. And I would hate to see us spend money and have less available as we need to respond in the future. So I will be supporting this amendment to the amendment, and looking to speak on the amendment as a whole after as well.
Okay, thank you. Any others on Deputy Mayor Ward's amendment to the amendment? Okay, if not, I'll call the question on that. And again, that is to remove the words from Electra dividends from the paragraph. So please indicate all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment. And opposed to that? None. Okay, so that amendment carries. We're back on to Councillor Harvey's amendment. Deputy Mayor Ward, you still have the floor if you wish to speak to it at this point.
No, not at this time.
Okay, next I have Councillor Kungle.
Yes, thank you. I would like to see A and B separated out in the motion. I would like to see A proceed as written from a reference to B. I guess my amendment would be that whether it's amendment, maybe more of a comment that I'm aligned, but from an urgency perspective, when we talk a bit about April and May around potential surge and intensity of COVID impacts, that if we did look at this, that there is a potential to still pass this type of benefit to residents, but perhaps in the next billing cycle. And could we wait until June when we had more information about how April and May proceeded around an impact and whether or not that would inform different scenarios around how we would want this money targeted, or the process for opting in or opting out of this fixed charge for water and wastewater.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the Councillor Kungle. Councillor Morales, you're next.
Hi there. Are we working?
You're working. Go ahead,
Okay.
Councillor Morales.
So am I on the original amendment or the amendment to the amendment?
Yes, we're back on the original amendment, Councillor Harvey's amendment.
Councillor Harvey, do you know what would happen if somebody applies for SERV funding, gets approved for SERV funding, and then when they had applied for the water treatment, they had applied for this fixed cost discount, they would have felt that they needed the waiving of the fixed cost, but then they apply for the SERV funding and they no longer need it. Like, is there a way for us to track that? Because I don't, essentially, this fills the gap if they have a need, but if they get funding through a federal program, then they're not so much of this need. My main point is I just don't want this to come at a great cost to all taxpayers to help out people who later get help from another program. Because we're still, it's really, unless there's a mechanism that we can claw back. I know the federal government has processes and they talk to the CRA and they do that, but I don't think we would have any local mechanisms. People who think they need it apply because they're in fear that they're not getting their CERB, or they're not getting their small business, their deductions for wages if it's a small business owner. Do you know if there's any way that we can prevent that?
Councillor Harvey?
I'm only speaking hypothetically on this one, Your Worship, but I wouldn't anticipate that we have any way of knowing who's receiving any other grants, whether it's through the federal SERB or if anything becomes available provincially. And realistically, because of the small dollar value per customer on this one, it obviously wouldn't be financially viable to spend a ton of money investigating people for a $67 fee that they're receiving back as a credit. But realistically, it's those people that have applied for the SERB that are most likely are low-income earners that have a family to feed that will be the ones that are applying for this, and that I don't anticipate that it's going to be those people that aren't feeling any financial hardships that are going to be applying for this. Again, you can only put so many measures in place to control that, but I'm not anticipating that we're going to be seeing an influx of people that are your more middle class, higher range earners. It's going to be our low income earners that will be applying for it, because the $67 means something to them, whereas for your upper middle class and stuff, they're not gonna take the time to apply for $67 because it just doesn't have that same same meaning to them and their family.
So back to the amendment. Councillor Riepma, Councillor McCann said some really good points about, you know, it's only $1 a day, or I think for some households it might be $2 a day. Here's the issue. To me, there's just something fundamentally wrong giving a fixed charge away for free when you know people are using it. Residentially, people are home more, so it's being used. I'm happy to, that's why I'll be supporting the staff recommendation to do a 3% reduction on consumption. That I support. But when you're waiving a fixed cost for something that is being used, to me, there's just something a little fundamentally wrong. Now, I'm well aware that there's some businesses that are just completely shut down. So then I struggle with this motion because to them, I want to give the fixed costs to waive this. So I'm a little bit struggling on both ends. I'm also, Councillor Harvey, you're talking about the people for need and the people not for need. The amendment, the whole motion, it's well intentioned. We want to help the people that need it the best. I just don't know if this is the best way to get the monies to the people most at need. And I'll give you an example. Some families can literally barely afford to eat right now. They're panicked, they're stressed out. $60 would be a grocery bill because they know how to stretch a grocery bill. Some families are spending $400+ in takeout. And you know what? Good for them. They are supporting local businesses. They have the means to spend over $400 a week in takeout. And that's a spectrum that we're dealing with. This amendment would give the family who's living on $60 for groceries and the family that's spending just on takeout, who knows what they're spending on groceries, the same discount or proportional to whatever their water bill is. So that's kind of problematic. It's almost like a flat tax instead of, it's more of a flat tax discount instead of being tied to their consumption. So the families that are, it would have more impact to the families that are struggling, that $60 would go a long way to, versus families doing it in takeout. And I want to help everybody as much as possible, but in terms of the long-term sustainability of the organization, I get it, some is coming from reserves, and you know, this is a once in 100-year project. It's, if there was a more efficient way to get a discount, that $60 to the people that truly need it versus the people that it's a nicer to have. This almost goes back to the garbage example that we struggled with a couple weeks ago. It would be, if you gave me the ability to put an extra garbage bag, most people would take it. I would probably take it. But because we did that opt-in, it's that little extra step. So I like the opt-in angle of this example, but I'm just struggling with, I just think it's a little bit of an inefficient method of getting money to the right people when to the other people, it might be $2 a day, but for us as an organization, it's going to cost us a couple $1 million. So I'm pretty split with it, unless anybody can have a solution.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Morales. Councillor Aylwin, you'd indicated too.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I want to start off by thanking staff for all the work they put into this on such short notice. I know they've been dealing with a lot, so I appreciate that. And thank you also to Mayor Lehman and Councillor Harvey for working on improving the amendment and the motion in the staff report. I've struggled with this a lot, to be honest. I especially struggled with the original motion in the staff report. In a crisis like this, I think we need to be cautious that the support programs that we implement don't entrench existing inequalities, just like the CERB has done, where OW and ODSP rates are well below the rate of the CERB. And it's unfortunate to see those inequalities entrenched through those programs. So I had that concern about the original motion as written, that we would be giving a blanket cut to people's water bills across the board, which would disproportionately affect wealthy people and also large corporations who have multiple locations around the city and people who have multiple properties throughout the city. So I was very unsupportive of that original approach. So I'm happy to see that Councillor Harvey and Mayor Lehman have made some attempts to improve upon the motion by making it a needs-based program. Of course, the way it's proposed is that it would pretty much be the honor system. People would have to attest to having a financial need. Landlords would have to attest that they would pass along the savings to their tenant. and we have to trust that people will do the right thing. So it is an improvement upon the original motion. So I will support the amendment. However, I'm still on the fence about the idea as a whole. I think we need to leave room for us to respond nimbly as more information becomes available. And I'm concerned about rushing into providing relief that may not actually provide much relief to the people we're seeking to help. So I'm open to hearing more from the rest of the councillors around the table or around the Zoom meeting, and we'll go from there. But I will support the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I'll just say a few things at this point, and then I'll go into a second round of comments or others who wish to speak to it. The original genesis of this amendment, when I was speaking with Councillor Harvey, you know, I think we were concerned, as Councillor McCann highlighted, you know, his feeling is $65 isn't significant, but the 3% reduction is only about $4 on the average bill. And obviously that to me is not significant enough to make any kind of a real difference to people. You know, I really appreciated actually Deputy Mayor Ward's amendment, because what it creates now is that the question is really, really clear for us. And I hear the concern, and I can actually, you know, support some of the desire to wait and see what the greater impacts are before we target relief. But Deputy Mayor Ward's amendment has made this only about one question, which is whether we spend the water and wastewater rate stabilization reserve on providing our residents some relief on their water bills or not. It removes the question of whether any additional funds are available later. It removes the question of fiscal impact on the city because we cannot spend those reserves on anything except the water and wastewater budgets. That's by legislation. So there's no longer any question about, is this going to fiscally impact the city, because that reserve is sitting there. And the only question is whether we deploy that money to support our residents in their time of need or not. I would note that, you know, staff have recommended a move that would cost up to $2 million. As a result of the changes that Councillor Harvey and I made to the amendment, this is now an opt-in program, and we would anticipate this will actually cost less. However, we have no way of knowing. I mean, it does depend on how many people, and we're trusting our residents here to only call. And if they're the kind of folks that can afford $400 a week on takeout, they shouldn't be calling and saying they're in financial hardship. We have to trust, and you're right, Councillor Owen, this is going to have a component of the honor system. And I can understand people not being comfortable with that, but I do think, you know, because this is now a very, very simple question, it's not a question of other relief or fiscal impact, because we're talking about the water and wastewater rate stabilization reserves. There is no other use for that money. There is no other opportunity later to spend it on a different form of relief. And there is no other impact or benefit to the city's overall financial position from a change in those reserves. I think that's why staff was comfortable recommending this in the first place. I don't want to speak for them. But, you know, they had recommended something that's a quarter of an inch thick over 8 months. And I think if I'm speaking out of turn, Councillor Harvey, I apologize, but I believe both of us felt that it was more significant to get relief into the hands of people sooner and at a more meaningful amount. For the people who need this, $65, as Councillor Harvey said, it's a week's worth of groceries for a single mom with her kid. It is a week's worth of groceries for a senior couple. It is, to me, not an insignificant amount. Is it going to change, solve all problems? Of course not. But we are in a situation where 6 million people have filed for emergency benefit assistance. It is a once in a lifetime, unprecedented crisis. And, you know, if the only question in front of us tonight, as a result of the amendment now to the amendment, is whether or not we say We're going to spend some of our rate stabilization reserves, which were created for the purpose of addressing unforeseen one-time situations. That's the only question in front of us. So I guess I would urge members of the General Committee to now support the amendment. There will be lots of opportunity at a later date to discuss if we wish to deploy some of the community benefit reserve to support either other relief or further recovery. I guess the only other thing I would say in closing is the water and wastewater budgets are different from our operating budget. We collect $22 million more from our residents than we spend. And that $22 million, 15 in wastewater and 7 in water, the water budget, that money goes into reserves for future projects. And so, we're not putting at risk in any sense an operating budget. What we're talking about is a budget where we're socking away $22 million. And today, in the midst of this crisis, I think it is time that we consider releasing some of that reserve funding. It was created for this purpose. It was built up for this kind of purpose. Although I don't think anybody ever envisioned a COVID-19 type crisis being where we would choose to spend from the rate stabilization reserve. I think the reason that Councillor Harvey and I put it forward in this way was that that $65 million is going to help us people. And sorry, the one other comment I wanted to make, and then I'll move on to the rest of the speakers list. I'm not sure if members of council are aware, but the consumption statistics residentially are showing about a 10 to 15% increase. That's because everybody's home all the time, and because we're asking them to wash things all the time, clean their house, do more laundry to cope with COVID. So there's public health, including us, telling our residents, use more water. And as a result of that, we're seeing consumption levels up by about 10 to 15%. That means everybody's bill next time is going to be bigger. So, we're, I think by moving now to provide relief at this time, when everybody's at home, it's this billing cycle where they're going to get a higher bill. And I think for some people where they've lost their job, they're now on emergency benefit, or they're in dire financial circumstances, every little bit helps, and council has the opportunity now, without affecting our fiscal position in the tax operating budget, to provide relief out of these reserves. So that's why we proposed it. Next I see Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I've had lengthy conversations with Councillor Harvey over this. We probably wasted half a day yesterday talking about it. And so the reality is, and this is the actual scary and the anxiety of people. Yes, $60 to people today is a lot of money, but that's a relief on the bill if they pay it. We're literally not mailing them a check for $60. The reason why we're going to have a shortfall of about 60 to 65 million is because people are not paying it. So by allowing the late charges, are we saying if we give them the reduction in they have to pay their bill? So if they leave it for 3 months to pay their water bill, are we going to allow them to have that discount? So that really doesn't help them today. It helps them in 4 months, but we don't know where 4 months will be. So we're not mailing them a check to help them with their groceries. If $60 is going to change their life so much today, they're not even going to pay the water bill at all. So that's where I'm a little bit concerned. And I really believe that the application process to opt in, a lot of people who really need it may not fill out that application out of embarrassment. It's a stigmatization. It's you call and you got to tell them you're in financial hardship. That's some of my concerns. So I'll wait to hear what everybody else says. And I don't believe that we were charging wastewater to the reserves in case of this. And I don't think that was the purpose of it. I truly believe that was in case the federal government changed the way water went back into Lake Simcoe, and if we had to change or water mains break, I think that's why it's there. And if something happened where we needed our reserves to maintain our infrastructure in our water program, we would have to go to the tax base to top it up. That's my comments, and I'll wait to hear what everybody else says. Thanks.
Mr. Prowse, could you answer that question?
Sorry, Councillor Morales, what was your question?
Sorry, I just could Mr. Prowse answer the, I know Councillor Thompson said that those were his comments, but he had a question built in there at the beginning, which I saw a lot of heads nodding and I'm super intrigued by. And the question is the following. This is not a check in people's pockets, so it's not really that much of a stimulus or grocery money. It's just it's a reduction in an expenditure. So here's the question. If a family just chooses to take advantage of the existing infrastructure, which is not pay the water bill for now, would they still get, and would they still do this application and then get the X number of dollars taken off their bill, or they can only do it if they pay their bill? How does that work? Because that was a really interesting question. It changes the entire framework of this. This is not a stimulus. This is not a money in pocket. This is just a reduction in expenditure.
Mr. Perez?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I think on this issue, perhaps our treasurer, Mr. Miller, can give the best response.
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to answer the question, the intent, I believe, of the amendment on the motion on the floor is that residents can send in a request, an application to have the fixed charge credited on their bill. So in effect, it would reduce the amount that they owe to the city.
So I'm just going to reframe. Councillor Thompson, feel free to jump in if I'm going to communicate it wrong. If the family member chooses not to pay their water bill, the first one for now, chooses to defer it and pay it late, and then goes and does an application, will they take it off? Or is it one of those, we will only give you the credit if you've paid your bill?
So through you, Mayor Lehman, I believe the intent is for people to send in their request now before they pay their bill to receive the credit on the next bill that they get. So it would be before they pay their bills.
And if they don't pay their bill, is the credit honored or not?
Yes, it would be on their bill. That would be, the credit would be taken off their total. And if they don't pay the remaining balance, then that would be the amount that would be outstanding.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Morales. Others who want to speak on the amendment, please indicate. Councillor McCann. Sorry, was that Councillor Tim Harris as well? Yeah, okay, go ahead, Councillor McCann, and then we'll
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. So I definitely want to maybe question a few of the comments that were made in the past 25 minutes, 30 minutes. And one of them is to maybe Councillor Harvey and to Mayor Lehman, is I've heard now peppered through this debate that you don't intend that 13,000, hold on, where's my number? 30,000 homes are actually going to apply for this $60 relief, which would be the $2 million. So why do you believe that every single household wouldn't apply for this free money?
Councillor Harvey, you'd made that original comment. I can chime in, but go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. If you look at the criteria that they would have to indicate that they've been susceptible to financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, I wouldn't anticipate, because we've got a large amount of people too that have been able to begin working from home and such forth, and that the intent of this motion is solely designed for those people that have lost their jobs, are most likely on the CERB benefit, and actually are in financial hardship to be applying for this. Is there possibility that some other people that the intent may not have been for them to apply that do squeak through? No different than any other benefit or funding that is applied by any level of government. You always get a certain percentage of that. and it's very difficult to track or stop. But the intent behind this is for those low income earners that are in financial hardship to have this little bit of assistance towards the water bill in their case. And like Mr. Millar had stated, it would show up as a credit on their bill. And obviously, if there's some concern around the table about what do we do if somebody doesn't pay the bill, I guess we could always have a discussion about whether or not those charges would be reversed if the bill's not paid within 60 or 90 days or whatever the case may be, if that seems to be another concern around the table. But the original intent is solely to assist those most vulnerable people in our society that are really scraping the bottom of the barrel to pay their bills as a result of COVID-19, because we've got a certain percentage of our society that realistically run day to day like that. And now that you've thrown that extra little wrench in, they don't have that little piece of buffer with finances to be able to carry them. And they're the ones that are really in the financial hardship. And that's the type of people that this is really targeted to.
Well, I definitely do appreciate that, Councillor Harvey. But I think it's time tonight that we have to quantify, right? I mean, that's great in theory, but so you're telling me that the person who makes six figures and now is making $0 because the government shut his businesses down or her business down, that person would not qualify for this this relief?
Councillor Harvey, go ahead, but I would say, of course, they would qualify.
I was just going to say the same thing, Your Worship. My intent, regardless of what one's initial income is, anybody that's can indicate that they've felt financial hardship as a result of this COVID-19, yes, they theoretically would be falling within the definition of what this amendment is trying to accomplish. Again, it's so hard to put every separate measure in place unless, again, you want to start drawing the line at an income level. But at this point, again, we can't have it too complicated, or else it'll create quite a bit of havoc for staff in the background. And that's why we kind of went through a bunch of different variables in the past couple of weeks as to how we could accomplish what we wanted to accomplish, because the billing system is only capable of doing certain types of credits and things of that nature. And that's why we ended up to where we are today with this amendment that's actually been changed probably 2 or 3 times now over the past couple of weeks, because it is very different than what my initial intent was.
I appreciate that, Councillor Harvey, and I agree that having a less complicated process would be ideal. But as you just said, this has been changed many times over the past couple weeks. You're, quite frankly, I don't mean to be a hard ass to you. I mean, I got the deepest respect for you, and you put a lot of work into this. But in 3 minutes, you said it's only for the really poor people. Now it's for everybody. So, like, I don't know who this is going to benefit. Then you're telling me that this is going to be not for 30,000 homes. That's going to be for less homes. And how can we really, manage this? Well, we can manage it pretty easily by changing paragraph 3. Instead of having a $2 million ceiling, bring that down to 500,000. And if that gets gobbled up in minutes, then we can come back to council and we can increase that. So that's one way that we can manage and maybe let the people who don't really need this subsidy, to let them know, hey, listen, this is for the people that really need it. For the people that really need a subsidy of $1 a day, right? I believe that the federal governments and our higher governments are taking care of them. They just got $4 million in from the government today. So I believe that they are taken care of in this manner. Now, the people that maybe fall through the cracks, that for some reason don't qualify for this extra funding, and this would help them, yes, I have the deepest sympathies for them, right? And would like this process, like Councillor Thompson said, not to have a paper trail. So I'm going to put an amendment up right now, and I'd like to continue speaking afterwards, after we vote, that we reduce the $2 million down to, and I'm open with a number, but I'm thinking 500,000.
Okay, so that is an amendment to the amendment. It would reduce the number of 2,500,000. Go ahead, Councillor McCann.
Well, I think I can't really add any more. Just that this is just too loose. And well, I will continue actually. You know, I'm actually not in favor of this motion at all. I'll be voting against it, but I just want to try to minimize the financial exposure. You had mentioned, Mayor Lehman, that people's water bills have gone up 10 or 15%. Well, I've got my water bill in front of me right here, and my water bill for 2 months is $129. Well, 15% of $129 is $19. So if the bill's gone up by 15%, why are we giving $66 as a benefit? Why aren't we reducing the bill by 20% or by 15%? So that's a rhetorical question, but that's what's going on in my mind right now. And the biggest issue that I have with this with this motion is that we don't have residents wanting us to do this. We've got, I'm not sure if Mr. Millar can give me a quick number, but 15 people complaining on 150,000 population, right? That's less than 1% of the population is actually concerned about this. And now we've spoken for over an hour on this issue to save $1 a day at the cost of up to $2 million. So I don't see the balance. This is imbalanced, and this is not a win-win-win, because the person who's winning is a very small number, but then the whole city is spending, has the risk of spending over $2 million. I think that $2 million can be spent in much more better ways and better ways. And I think that having time is what's going to serve the city very better. So I'll say no more about the $500,000 cap and see how council thinks about that.
Okay, we have an amendment to the amendment to change the cap to $500,000. Councillor Thompson on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to Councillor McCann, at the 500, would there be wording in it that in 2 meetings or a month from now, we revisit with possibly adding more if, so like it's right in the verbiage that this isn't just a 500, that there would be a continuous or a revisit? Would you accept that as a friendly?
Mayor Lehman?
You can absolutely accept it as a friendly. It's up to you, Councillor McCann.
No, I was waiting for you to bring me in. So thank you, Mayor Lehman. So Councillor Thompson, for sure I would leave that as a friendly. I mean, I'm just trying to manage the exposure the city of Barrie has, right? So if what I'd like to do is the people who actually need this, make this process seamless. But we need to let the expectation of our residents know that we are in this together, right? And not to take advantage of this. So therefore, $2 million, everybody's jumping in. $500,000, hopefully the rational homeowner or water bill payer will actually realize, let's leave this to the people that is most needed. And therefore, we won't have a rush to the gates and spend $2 million in 2 days. So yes, absolutely, I would accept that.
Councillor Thompson, did you have anything else, or?
No, I was just wondering if we were going to vote on what Councillor Kungo asked for, the items to be separated before we start making amendments to Section B.
No, we're currently on an amendment to Section B. So what we would do is when we go back to the main motion as amended or not, we'll vote on the 2 paragraphs separately at that point.
Okay, perfect.
If no other amendments pass, if what's on the floor doesn't pass, then the staff recommendation of the 3%, the $4 a month will be on the floor, and we are going to separate and vote on those 2 separately at that point. But
okay,
for the moment,
yeah,
for the moment, we're boiling the ocean on B.
Perfect, thank you.
So the $500,000 is the amendment to the amendment. Those who wish to speak to that, any others who wish to speak to that? Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. This was like one of my favorite debates ever, I think, on City Council. So many great ideas and input, and I really I wanted to sit back because it was a tough one, because I think there's so many great pieces that we have to come to with this unprecedented situation that we're in. I love this friendly amendment. I think it's a really great middle ground, and that we can approach it again after. We can kind of get the money to people that will use this. It is something, you know, if your income is that low, you do know where every dollar goes. You have a budget down to the dollar, and it will make a difference. It is a couple grocery shopping if it's that if you're that low of income. So it'll help. I just think this is a great middle ground.
So just as a reminder of what's on the floor, members of, and thanks for that, Councillor Harris. It's to change the cap to $500,000. And with Councillor Thompson, let me see if I get this right, because I don't think we had the specific wording on this. You had asked, and Councillor McCann had accepted that this come back to General Committee, I think in a month is what you said, to look at potentially increasing the cap to the program. Is that, did I get that right? Yes, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm nodding my head like you're supposed to just turn to the left. You can see me.
That's right.
I forgot we're on Zoom.
That's right. Okay, so all good. Thanks for that. Councillor Jim Harris, I have you next on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And yeah, I do concur with Councillor Natalie Harris. It's been a really interesting discussion. And what I do get a sense from listening is everybody wants to do something. And there is it feels like a consensus that the wastewater bill might be a place that we could do this for our citizens. But when I was looking at this, and it's come, you know, obviously different variations and the amendments and such, I was kind of wondering, like, my calculation, is this going to be timely? Is it going to be meaningful? Will it be targeted enough? And will it be manageable for the city as a, you know, our economic realities that we're facing, given the cost and the losses to the city because of COVID. So I think in the discussion, we've managed to touch on some of those. I think we're still struggling a bit with it being targeted, but I think the reducing the amount reduces our exposure, and hopefully for those who really need this, they will get front of line. And I guess some of my questions relate to, and I asked the question about the $4 million from the province and the federal government, because I'm hopeful, and over the history of utility supports, there's been programs funded provincially and federally to help people pay utilities. There's often people struggle with utilities, and we know the utility costs have gone up exponentially over the last decade. So that's become a real concern for individuals. So I do like the effort to find a way for us to support residents and to make it targeted. So I could support this. I was actually going to ask, I know what Councillor McCann started the conversation from his perspective on asking for more time. And I guess at this point, I'm wondering, given we've discussed it so much and made some interesting amendments, obviously Councillor Ward's was an effective one, and now the $500,000, and from Councillor McCann with the review, and the one from Councillor Thompson, if I've got it all correct. That maybe, is that the kind of time you're hoping for, Councillor McCann? And have we got to a place where we can do this in a manner that it does become, for those who really need it, it's timely, it's meaningful, and it's targeted enough, and at a measured enough risk for the city to be able to move forward? So thank you for answering that question.
Okay, sorry, was that a question to Councillor McCann, or was that more of a comment, Councillor?
Thank you. It was a comment with that question. I just wondering if, with the original comment from Councillor McCann, which I thought was a good comment about taking more time, given we don't have the needs-based implementation standards here in front of us, but we know staff will put together a good plan. I'm just wondering if what we've discussed tonight and the amendments that have been put forward have kind of answered what might have been sought in having this deferred for more staff input. So that was a question, Mr. McCann. So Councillor McCann, thank you.
Okay, Councillor McCann.
Councillor Harris, I appreciate the question, and I'm just trying to process here. I'm really trying to be a team player here. I really am. And what we haven't talked about is worst case scenarios, right? The $2 million is the worst case scenario. We put that. So I'm asking for worst case scenario for the next 30 days to be 500,000. Don't be surprised if I vote this down completely, because I still would like to process this all in a month's time, but I'm trying to minimize the variance here. Like, I am not trying to be a fear monger right now, so I'm going to tread lightly with my words, but like, we don't know what the worst of this crisis, this COVID-19 crisis, is going to be, right? CEO Prowse said it's going to be a $60 million hit. And we're asking to spend $2 million, or maybe now $500,000, an amount of money that we don't have any really residents asking for it. Like, I don't know why we're solving a problem that doesn't exist. Like, it's boggling my mind. I understand that Councillor Harvey and Mayor Lehman have a passion towards it, so I mean, I can definitely respect that, and hopefully they respect, you know, my thoughts of trying to protect the city's financial future, right? And we all look process and we all examine things our own way, and that's what makes a great council. We bring 11 different ideas, and 6 of us got to vote on them, right? So I know I'm giving you, hopefully I'm not giving you a long-winded answer. No, I'm not satisfied with this amendment at 500,000, but I'm more satisfied at 500,000 than I am at 2 million. I don't know what the worst is going to be, and when our director of finance doesn't know what it's going to be, when our CEO Prowse doesn't know what it's going to be, this scares me. And so right now, I only want to spend money on needs. I don't want to spend money on wants. And clearly, having less than 1% of our population asking for this, this is definitely a want by council. So to answer your question, no, I'm not satisfied, but I would rather take 500 than 2 million. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor McCann. I appreciate your perspective, and all the perspectives have been very helpful. Although it's still a challenging decision, I think it's an important one, and I appreciate the discussion greatly. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. We're on the reduction to 500,000 in the cap from 2 million. Are there others who wish to speak to that?
Call to vote.
Councillor Kungle.
Just briefly through you, Mayor Lehman, to Mike, but maybe some more broadly to fellow councillors, because I'm hearing this comment about a perception that a $500,000 cap would mean, you know, ideally people that most need will get to the front of the line, and this will actually be targeted. I actually have more of a concern about if you're narrowing a budget, creating a have and a have not. And in the end, for me, it's all about the process by which is open to the public. And so whether capping it at a lower amount drives a different incentive or process for certain individuals, but I actually don't, I see it more as a, you know, supporting the 2 million in a process by which individuals have equal chance to opt in or opt out, or deferring it to a different conversation at a different time with more information where we talk about what do targeted dollars and relief look like. So for me, I've actually got more concerns about limiting it to 500, because it feels like there's some perception about being able to support a better process.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Kungle. Councillor McCann.
Sorry, I just want to maybe get some clarification from Councillor Kungle. So you can still do both, right? You can vote in favor of the $500,000 cap, right? And you can still reject Part B, and you can still accept the next amendment that's moving forward that pushes us off a month. So right now we're just talking about the reducing it from 2 million to 500,000, right? To just see what the interest is. We're doing a bit of a market analysis, right? How many people, if less than 1% of our population have asked for this, it's probably less than 0.3%, right? Maybe we won't have anybody, very few people applying, right? But having that door, exposing us to $2 million, to me, causes me great fear. Thank you.
Any other comments on the $500,000 amendment? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will support this. Realistically, like I said earlier, I don't anticipate that we would even crest the $1 million mark when you look at the numbers. This $500,000 still allows us right around the 74, almost 75 100 customers to apply for. And I do respect Councillor McCann's concerns, and realistically, if it becomes a very successful program, much more successful than what any of us would ever anticipate, I guess staff could always come back with their recommendations to move forward.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Anyone else wish to speak to the amendment Okay, I'm actually going to support this as well because of Councillor Thompson's addition. Sure, I think $500,000 will likely fund the program through the first month. If it does not, we will be considering this again in a month's time anyway. If that increases the level of comfort around the potential use of the rate stabilization reserves for more than that, I think that's fine. Let's do this for a month and check in. But I would also urge that on this amendment, regardless of the amount that you're capping at or the reporting back time, the concern is now, right? I mean, we have 6 million people who lost their jobs over the last month, and that is who we're trying to support with this relief. The people out there who are trying all of a sudden to make their household budget work with a water bill that is going to be higher in the next billing cycle, and are trying to do that on lower income. So I'll support the amendment to the amendment as well, and I will call the question on it. So this is on the reducing the cap from 2 million to 500,000, and asking staff to report back on the matter in mid-May, in a month. Those in favor of that amendment, please indicate. Those opposed? 1. Okay, that carries. So on the original amendment, Councillor Harvey's amendment, which has now been amended twice by Deputy Mayor Ward and Councillor McCann, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I agree with Councillor Harris, Natalie Harris. This has been a really, and Councillor Jim Harris as well, this has been a really fruitful discussion. I think that we've all built on amendments. I think I have an amendment. I'm going to put it on the floor as I say it. If there's implementation challenges that staff give me feedback, I'm happy to take it off, but this has been a really good brainstorming session. And I think this would take me from a likely no vote on this motion to a likely yes vote if it can be implemented. So my amendment would be roughly as follows, that it would, and sorry if my screen froze, I just have to look at Legislar. I would be amending A and B as printed and as amended, because we just amended it. Mr. Millar, could we essentially do section A as an opt-in? So no blanket extension of bills, and no more blanket, in addition to the one we already approved, no more blanket deferral of bills, only if you request it. So in section B right now, we're already going to create some sort of form. So let's capitalize on that. So I don't get the argument. The argument of it's going to take time, that's moot, because we already have that on board. So the extension of the bill payments, from 30 days to 60 days, and the deferrals of water waste, of water bills and property taxes. If somebody applies for it, if they go opt-in, if they go out of their way, they get that. And in that same little page on the website or that form or on the app, whatever it may be, there's also another page that says, great, you've requested an extension. And then there's a second page that says, are you also at a level of hardship where you would request to have the fixed rate waived? And if the answer is yes, then that's a double application. I like that extra layer and step, because it would probably reduce the long-term cost to us and get it more to the need. As Councillor Natalie Harris said, if you're the kind of person that's super vulnerable in the situation and low income, you know where every dollar is going. So if you hear about this program, you're going to take those, you're already doing the form, you're going to do the form to defer payment and with no late fees, and you're going to click the extra button to get this get this waived. And I think this would actually be successful. We target more of the people we target, and no longer is the extension of the time period opt out. It's now opt in, which I think would actually help our cash flows quite significantly. So I'm going to leave that with Mr. Millar. I talked a bit, Mr. Millar. If you need some refinement of my comments, I'm happy to provide them.
Sorry, Councillor Morales, just before I get Mr. Millar's comments. So can you just clarify one more time what you would be doing with the motion?
I would be amending A as well. I would not be providing an extension from 30 days to 60 days for payment blanket. It would only apply if you opt in. So you would actually have to apply that. It wouldn't be a blanket. Everybody's accounts are automatically extended, no problem. I believe that will help with our cash flows. So people who truly need it, they are taking that extra step to apply for it. And people who are on the fence and would say, it'd be nice to get it. But you know what? On second thought, if I have to do an application, I probably do have the money. And that would help our cash flow situation significantly. And in that same form, there would be another page or button that says, do you want the application to have the fixed cost waived? So capture two birds with one stone in one web page or whatever form we're using. And I believe this would significantly help our cash flows because we are no longer extending the 30 days to 60 days for everybody's standard. It's only if you do the form. So it would be opt-in for the extension as well. And I feel pretty strongly that would significantly improve our cash flows. Because now the default is you still pay your bills and you opt in. The default is not you get an extension on the 30 days and you opt in.
Okay, Mr. Miller, would you like to comment?
Through you, Mayor Lehman. Thank you for the question, Councillor Morales. I think it is important for council to realize there is some complexity in changing our billing system. To do what Councillor Morales is asking, I believe it's just having folks giving the ability, if they want to defer the payment to a longer, the 60 days, they would opt into that if they wish. That would be complex to do because right now we have a system that's built generally generic due dates for all residential and commercial. So I would to give you a definitive answer on that, I would have to do some more work with the team to understand what we could do in our system. My initial thought is it would be difficult to do that in the near term. It would require quite a bit of work.
So is that the reason why we did a blanket deferral on late fees as a city? Well, we did blanket a couple weeks ago instead of an opt-in. Is that the reason because of the implementation?
That is certainly one of the reasons, the ease to do that. It was easy to do, yes.
Okay, so in that regard, I'm going to do a hybrid. Again, we've had such a good brainstorming session. I'm going to do a hybrid of Councillor McCann's original intent here, which would be a deferral. Help me out, staff, with this to essentially give you guys the time to look into that over the next week. Again, we don't know how long this is going to last. There's this psychological emotional need to do something to help, which is totally valid, but to do something for the sake of doing something, if it's unrefined, we can wait the week. We can get the answer. If the answer is yes, it's implementable and we can do an opt-in approach, that would significantly help our cash flows. And I think everybody's concerns are addressed. And if the answer is it's impossible, period, then we can come back to the discussion table. But I think there's no reason to rush this tonight. We're already having general committee and city council, I believe, back to back. So yeah, I guess I'm going to amend my wording and just say that we would refer this back to staff to report back to the next general committee meeting about doing opt-in for an extension in water waste bills as well. And if we can do that, and if we can, we would piggyback the request to have the fixed cost waived, still with the $500,000 parameter and still with the other amendments that Councillor Harvey originally had in his, and Mayor Lehman.
So Councillor McCann's referral motion, I think, is an alternative to this one. And Councillor Morales, I kind of feel the same way about your referral motion. I mean, the matter that's on the floor, if you wish to amend it, that's fine. But the amendment is on the floor. If after this you want to try and introduce a referral motion, or Councillor McCann introduce a referral motion, you're welcome to do so then. But I think you would need to amend the amendment that's on the floor, which is Councillor Harvey's.
Here's the only issue with this. I like the foundation of Councillor Harvey's current motion, but I don't like enough to vote for it in favor. I don't want it to pass, and I don't want it to fail. and I can't amendment because I can't amend it because I can't get a clear, sure answer from staff because they don't know the answer, which is totally valid. So that's why I'm not jumping. That's why I'm asking for a referral, and I'm not trying to separate the two. Let the motion pass or not pass first and then go to referral. See, it would be a little bit tough because, for example, for my vote, I don't know if I should be voting in favor of it and it comes down to one vote, or I should be voting against it, thinking I could just refer it. That's why it's a little bit tricky.
So, and I'm a bit concerned that after an hour and a bit, we are starting to get into, micromanaging the city's cash flow. And I think if I might just on the matter, Councillor Morales, and I hope this will help assuage your concerns. Our staff allowed people to not pay their water and wastewater bills and not pay their property tax bills without penalty as an initial step that was taken several weeks ago. So, and in Mr. Miller's presentation or staff report in Mr. Preuss's presentation last week to General Committee, they made it clear that they were comfortable with the cash flow implications of doing that, which is of course much broader than anything we're talking about here, especially at a $500,000 cap. I mean, that is potentially millions and millions in cash flow. And I believe, and I shouldn't speak for CAO Preuss and Mr. Miller, but the reason why they were comfortable with the cash flow implication of that measure, which is, an order of magnitude greater than what we're talking about at the moment, was that the city is in a position to be able to support some portion of the population not paying their bills for an extra 30 days. And they also recommended that here today with paragraph A. So I guess the only thing I can advise members of General Committee and yourself, Councillor Morales, since you raise it, is the matter that's on the floor now has been improved by 3 amendments, Councillor Thompson, Councillor McCann, Deputy Mayor Ward. The exposure is the potential for up to $500,000 from 2 reserve funds that will be sitting there anyway. And I believe that is the reason why there was no concern from staff in recommending an expenditure that was 4 times larger than that in tonight's staff report. And council has said you're not comfortable with that. You want to move down to $500,000, pump the brakes, potentially spend that, and then a month from now we can look at it again. But if you're concerned specifically around the need to create an opt-in for the extension of the payment period, I mean, setting aside the technical challenge, I guess I'm just trying to indicate that, and I can ask, you could ask CAO Preuss or Mr. Miller to speak to this, that I don't believe there's a cash flow issue there with regards to the billing date.
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to General Council. That's correct. The recommendation is that's in the staff report. We believe we can handle the deferred payment plan at this point in time. So that was one of the recommendations in there. I think as we learn more over the coming months, in terms of how many people are going to pay on time, how many people won't, we will come back and have that conversation with council as well. But at this time, we are pretty comfortable on the recommendation.
Mr. Miller, I'm not asking you for the magnitude, but I'm asking you for the fact if you could get past the technical argument, because I do believe it is City Council's job to manage cash flows. I don't buy that it isn't. A situation where you're opting in, just logically, that's going to reduce the number of no payments or late payments, just by logical argument. Again, I'm not asking you to give me a magnitude because you can't predict that, at least on the spot right now. But if people are opting in to paying a little bit later, you're going to have just intuitively less people do that than if you just gave the blanket approach. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Lehman. I'm not sure I can answer that, Councillor Lehman. Maybe I'll pass that one over to CAO Preuss for his opinion.
Mr. Preuss.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to Councillor Morales. Well, I think certainly in a mathematical formula that the drag on the request probably makes sense. The piece I would want to highlight for council would be that we have previously communicated to our residents the grace period. If council opted to create a now opt-in process, I would just ask you to consider that there may be some confusion created by that, and the good work that you're attempting to do here tonight might be lost in the confusion around that communication piece.
Confusion amongst who?
Mayor Lehman, I have a point of order.
Councillor Owen, point of order.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I believe we're talking about point A through this whole conversation when we're actually supposed to be talking about the amendment to B. So I'm just hoping we can refocus on what's actually on the floor.
No, that's actually fair, Councillor Owen. My feeling would be, Councillor Morales, if you wish to amend B, please go ahead and do so. Otherwise, we can pick this discussion up again when we return to the main motion and A is on the floor. So if you wish to amend paragraph B.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'll kind of go back to you for procedure. I would like to amend B, but B is essentially A is being affected by the amendment of B. So how would you like this to be executed? I agree that they're separate, but they're related. The amendment of B comes down to if council decides to change A to opt in. So it is kind of related, but I can follow a lead on this.
So the matter that's on the floor right now, we're back on Councillor Harvey's original amendment, which is instead of the 3% reduction of water bills in all bands, the opt-in program based on need for this $65 fixed charge. So that A is not on the floor. So I guess my issue, Councillor Morales, is if you need to change some wording to B, that's now. Do that now. Otherwise, if you could hold off, we'll deal with the matter that's on the floor and you can amend paragraph A.
Okay, I'll retract the amendment. We can go for B and then we'll go from there. And again, if there's even a hybrid with Councillor McCann's referral, because I don't know what's coming there, we can go from there. So I'll retract that and let's stick to B and get going on that.
Okay, members of General Committee, what's on the floor is now the original amendment from Councillor Harvey, amended 3 times by Councillors McCann, Thompson, and Deputy Mayor Ward. Does anyone else wish to speak to the matter that's on the floor? Okay, then I will call the question on it. It is paragraph B. Sorry, Councillor Thompson, did you have a question or a comment? Or okay, so I will call the question. Those in favor of paragraph B, the amendment to paragraph B as further amended, please indicate. Those in favor. And opposed. 3. The amendment carries. So we are now back on the main motion, which is the original paragraph A from staff, which is the extension of the payment period from 35 to 60 days for residential and 30 to 60 days for commercial. And then Councillor Harvey's amendment with the further changes that the General Committee has made. Councillor Morales, I'll go back to you for an amendment to paragraph A if you wish.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'll just quickly ask a question to Councillor McCann. Councillor McCann, you had a referral or a deferral. Could you let everybody know what it was? Maybe it's the same as mine, and apologies because we didn't really talk about it, or maybe it's a better alternative.
Sure.
Councillor McCann.
Thank you. That staff report, well, I'll just give you the gist, is that basically we wait 1 month to make any decisions to see what the impact on COVID-19 is. Do you want me to read the actual amendment to you?
Yes, please.
Was that it? What you just said?
That's the gist of it. Do you want me to read the whole amendment, Serge?
Well, hold on. Before you read it, I like the gist of it. Read whatever you had written. If you could somehow capture my sentiment, which is for staff to explore the technical feasibility of opt-in as a quick one-liner, and if the answer is no, they're going to come back in the memo and say no. So whatever yours is, as long as if you are willing and able to capture for them to just look at the feasibility of opt-in, then I don't need to move anything and we can go off yours.
Yeah, Councilor Morales, I need a little more clarity from your part. If you can just, like, what's the process that you wanna create right now? Just so I.
Okay, I'll just ask you both to hold on just for a second here. So we have the main motion on the floor, and if a referral motion is to be introduced, referral motions are not debatable. So you need to get it all in there up front. So whoever's going to do it, I'm fine with it. You can put it on the floor, and unfortunately, we will not be able to discuss it. A referral motion have to call the question without debate. So I guess I'm a little concerned, Councillor Morales. That's why, if you want to introduce the referral motion with your specific requirements, that might be better than Councillor McCann trying to interpret what you're saying. So that would be my suggestion to you.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to go back. Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Councillor McCann, let me give you that example. So, right now, for example, when the beginning of this month happened, if I didn't want to pay my property taxes, I didn't have to. I didn't get an NSF fee. I didn't get a late payment fee. I didn't have to proactively do anything. I want to move to a scenario where for the water, I have to go proactively do something on a web form, 2-3 minutes, to get that extension. And if I was really struggling, to get the get the fixed charge waived. So right now for our taxes, it's different than water, but for our taxes and for water, I didn't need to do anything.
Yeah, Councilor Morales. Whenever I'm doing the project in business, I try to make the project as clear and as simple as possible. It's a great quote in a book called The Monk Who Sold His Red Ferrari. When your vision is clear, so will your results. And I appreciate what you were asking me to do, but I just don't know if I can buy into that right now, because I believe that deferring payment with the ease that people didn't have to gather at a bank or be on the phone with their mortgage company for X amount of hours, or with the city of Barrie, because it's a little more complicated dealing with the city of Barrie now because of the restrictions, that I believe that deferral without the complexity of filling out an application is something that I like. That may change in a month from now, but right now, so I wouldn't be supportive of that. I would be supportive of my referral. So I think maybe what we should do, we should have talked before this, but unfortunately we didn't. And so out of respect for Mayor, maybe I'll let you do your thing and I'll do mine, okay?
For myself, my iPad ran out of battery and I had to hop onto my phone.
No, we can hear you, Councillor Morales. Go ahead.
No, my question to Councillor McCann was, while I was speaking, my signal cut out because my iPad ran out of battery, so I had to hop onto my cell phone. So was Councillor McCann's, I caught the last 40% of that. Was that directed towards me?
Yes.
Yeah, it was all towards you. The short version is he did not want to try and blend the amendments and is in favor of keeping things simple. So he indicated he didn't support what you were seeking to do, but from a procedural point of view, he asked that you proceed separately. So, and I would agree. So go ahead if you have an amendment.
Okay, well, he expressed earlier that he had a motion before mine. Mine just came from the brainstorming. So I'll let his go forward, and whether or not it passes, then I'll proceed, because he kind of expressed he was going first.
Okay, Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'm going to retract my referral. I'm going to be a team player. I think Gary's put a lot of work and Council Harvey's put a lot of work and effort into this. And I think that was a nice compromise. I don't appreciate us not finding information, but if $500,000 is going to give some relief and some mental stability to our community and let our community know that we care, then I do believe it's a lot of money. And I hope we don't use it all up in a period. But I'm going to be happy with the amendment we passed, the motion we passed. Thank you, Mayor Lehman.
Thanks, Councillor McCann. Deputy Mayor Ward.
I wanted to go back to Councillor Kungle, I think mentioned about separating the motions. Is it possible to do that?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, we can vote on both, on the two paragraphs separately. Are there any further comments?
But if we do.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Deputy Mayor Ward.
The way it's written now, it sounds like it's going to be for all time. I wonder if there should be a date when that's going to end. An extension of the payment periods for water and wastewater bills from 35 to 60 days. It doesn't say until the fall or 2020 or something like that, or 2021. I just wonder if it should say something like that.
Excellent, excellent catch, Deputy Mayor Ward. I'll go to the CAO. Mr. Prowse, any thoughts on this, or was it intentional to not put a date on it?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I think I referred to Mr. Villar, but I believe part of the strategy was he had an additional staff report coming in May where he was going to address some of these measures, but maybe Mr. Miller could address it.
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mayor Lehman. Yeah, that was exactly the idea. Was this won't be the last time we're talking about the financial condition that this crisis has had on the city. So the idea was to get some, reasonable relief out there and to come back and revisit it, whether it be a month, 2 months, or in the fall. I think we'll probably be having multiple conversations, but certainly open to, it's not a bad idea if you wanted to put a cap on that now. But as I said, we will be talking more about it in the near future.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Ward.
Yeah, I wonder if we should put something in there about the next 2 billing periods, at least have it, and then we can revisit it if it's still needed after that. But I think it looks like we're going to need it for at least 2 more billing periods. But maybe the amendment would be an extension of the payment periods for waste and water bills, and at the end of it, say for the next 2 billing periods, which would be 4 months.
Okay, so that's an amendment to paragraph A to add the words for the next 2 billing periods. Any comments or questions on that amendment? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question on that. Those in favor of that amendment? Any opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Any further comments on paragraphs A or B? Okay, there's been a request to separate them, so we will vote on them separately. Both are as amended. So as a reminder, paragraph A, we just passed the amendment to specify that's only for the next 2 billing cycles. And I will call the question on paragraph A. Those in favor of paragraph A, please indicate. And any opposed? None. On paragraph B, which was amended 3 times, and as a reminder, we're at $500,000 and a report back within a month with the funding to come solely from the 2 rate stabilization reserves. I will call the question. Those in favor of paragraph B? Opposed? 1. That carries. Okay, that completes the staff report. Thank you, members of General Committee. It was a long process, but a number of additions there for different amendments. And we will see how that goes. I thank you for providing some relief to those in our community who need it. We have no reports of officers, items for discussion, information items, and we were going to do inquiries and announcements at City Council. So comments on the circulation lists. Any comments on tonight's circulation list, the April 15th circulation list? Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kungle.
Just a quick point of acknowledgement around C1 related to correspondence from the Barrie Supervised Consumption Site.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to briefly speak to that. I thought it would be of interest to the public just to share that communication that came and that relayed from the Site Selection Advisory Committee that, of course, due to the COVID considerations and those pressures, that at this time we're aware that the capacity to continue to actively work on the application process has been paused, and we'll look to that committee to identify when they're able to resume work. So just a point of note I wanted to share to make sure that the public had an opportunity to be aware that that is formally on pause. Oh, I think Mayor Lehman, you might have been muted there.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks for making note of that, Councillor Kungl, and I have had some meeting inquiries about that as well. Any other comments on the circulation list, members of General Committee? Okay, seeing none, I will declare General Committee adjourned. We do have City Council immediately following. And if our clerk is prepared to proceed right away and our IT folks are ready to proceed right away. We are, okay. So we are actually able to do the national anthem and the land acknowledgement tonight. So I'll just, but before we do that, we need to be formally called to order by City Clerk, Ms. Cook.
Please rise as you are able. I now call this meeting of City Council to order.
Thank you. We acknowledge that this meeting tonight is taking place on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We're dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. You may be seated. Okay, welcome to City Council. We, of course, have just the one General Committee report tonight. Now, because we separated those two components of the staff report, we will also have to have a section C. And Deputy Mayor Ward, I do have the paper here because I'm fortunate enough to have the clerk in the same room. Deputy Mayor Ward, section A, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Elwin, that section A of General Committee report dated April 15th, 2020 be received.
Okay, thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Aylwin, that section A of the General Committee report dated April 15th, 2020 be received. This is the presentation. Received the report and the presentation. Comments or questions? Seeing none. Those in favor of section A, please indicate. Are any opposed? None. That carries. Section B, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Owen, that section B of General Committee report dated April 15th, 2020 be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Aylwin, that section B of the General Committee report dated April 15th, 2020 be adopted. This is the first paragraph, paragraph A of the property tax and water and wastewater considerations. Comments or questions on section B? Seeing none, those in favor, please indicate. Any opposed? None. That carries. Section C.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Owen, that section C of General Committee report dated April 15th, 2020 be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Owen, that section C of the General Committee report dated April 15th, 2020 be adopted. This is paragraph B. Comments or questions? Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor of section C, please indicate. And opposed? 2. Okay. Okay, that completes the committee reports. It brings us to inquiries. Deputy Mayor Ward, any inquiries?
I do have one. Actually, two. I wondered where Councillor Harris's cat was tonight. I quite missed it. But otherwise, when the county gave us these for our meeting, I thought they were kind of corny, but I actually liked them. I think it actually would help the meetings if we were all given things like this. So I'm not sure whether staff can look into or getting something like that to use at the meetings. I think they're actually easier to tell when somebody wants to ask a question, that sort of thing. So.
You know, Deputy Mayor Ward, it would make my life easier too. So sure, why don't we get our Barry version of the red, yellow, and green card? Councillor Owen with the big yes. Absolutely, we'll arrange that for our next virtual meeting. Appreciate that. Any other inquiries of staff, Deputy Mayor Ward? Nope. Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I was eager. I had a question, and it's come from a few residents and other people that I've come in contact with, obviously distance contact, regarding the landfill and the fact that it's closed to residents. And I just want to I have a question on, I know I can direct it to Ms. Miller, but I just wanted to first, I targeted my question to Director of Operations Dave Frary today, and he gave me an absolutely fabulous answer with lots of information, much more than I expected. So I want to recognize and thank him for that. But I just wanted to pose the question for folks who are watching, other councils, I'm sure they're getting the same question to Ms. Miller. Can you explain for our residents and council why we've closed and remain closed the landfill to residents of Barrie? Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris. We're currently working very hard to protect the integrity of the curbside collection program. Obviously, that is a very essential service, as well as the integrity of the actual landfill operation. It's a little challenging at times to collect all of the tonnage that is being put out because we actually have a daily tonnage limit that is set by the Ministry of the Environment for the landfill. And with the additional bags that are being put out and now yard waste, we are a little bit close to that maximum daily limit. So we're watching that very carefully. The other thing is that it's very difficult to maintain all public health protocols if we're remaining open to the public, particularly with respect to our scale house in and out operation, as well as some of the attendants that would need to be on the pad. We hope that most people drop things properly into the bins on the pad, but sometimes they don't, and that means that our staff would need to interact. And finally, there are a number of private disposal sites available in Barrie that are actually very comparative when we take a look at tipping fees. So during the state of the emergency, we believe that there are other options that would allow us to remain our focus on the essential curbside while still giving options for the public to dispose of their additional waste at this time.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Any other inquiries of staff? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Is Ms. Banfield on the call for this meeting?
No, but Ms. Miller is.
Perfect. So Ms. Miller, we got an email, all of council got an email today from AMO. And in the bottom of kind of the weekly or the daily COVID update, it said that there were changes to the Planning Act that have been brought forward that would allow some components of Planning Act requirements, legislation, and timelines to proceed. It did say that what was brought forward by Queen's Park was very complex and detailed. So I'm assuming that so I guess my question to you is, are you aware of this? Have staff gone through the details to see what we can do now and what we still can't do? And when would we be able to move forward with getting some of our planning components back on track?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales, yes, staff are definitely aware of these changes. We're working our way through the details. It essentially allows council, if they wish, to not deal with planning applications and not be subject to some of the potential appeal challenges that would normally affect you. We're in a position in Barrie that we're able to very much proceed with business on our development applications. And we are hoping to be in a position to have a proposal for council to consider those staff reports and hopefully public meetings shortly. We'll be working with the clerk's department and the mayor to have some conversations about that. And I hope that in the coming weeks, you will have some planning business to occupy your meetings.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Morales, any other inquiries of staff? Okay, seeing none. Announcements, members of general committee or council, any announcements?
Yep.
Deputy Mayor Ward.
I have one. I know there was a lot of interest around the sports dome that was proposed for behind the high school on Ann Street. According to the city's website, it's put up recently that the application has been withdrawn by the applicant and the file closed. I know there were a lot of people interested in that particular proposal. So it has, according to the city website, it has been withdrawn. So there's no action being taken by the proponents of that dome.
Thanks for that, Deputy Mayor Ward. It's remember that, members of general committee. Any other announcements tonight? Okay, I have a few. First of all, I should note right off the hop, we have been told again, RVH and some of our long-term care communities are in dire need of PPE, including unopened boxes of masks and gloves. So if there are individuals or companies, businesses out there, organizations who are able to donate, those donations would be most welcome. The RVH's donation email address is foundation@rvh.on.ca. Any donations are much appreciated until further supplies are received from the province. Some very good news today, and I'm pleased to announce this tonight here at City Council. Our electric company, that people at Barrie own 9% of, Electra, is in a position to be able to make major donations today. We're all announcing these, the mayors of the Electra cities, to our food banks. So I'm announcing tonight on behalf of Electra that we are donating $20,000 to the Barrie Food Bank. And this is also occurring across our service territory, Mississauga, Hamilton, Brampton, and a number of other cities as well. The food bank, of course, are doing tremendous work, but the demand is higher right now with the impacts of the crisis. So thank you to Electra. It's also, I think, yes, street sweeping is the next announcement I've got. It actually did start April 6th. I know actually we did have some questions around that. It will take approximately 10 weeks to complete this, weather permitting. But it is an important measure that we undertake at the city to protect our source water and also to clean up our public spaces. There is a schedule of street sweeping on the website if you're interested in your neighborhood or street is going to be done. Rain barrels. Normally we do this as a truckload sale. We can't do that this year due to gathering, but you can buy a rain barrel online. Enviroworld.ca/Barrie is where you can go to purchase your rain barrel. It will be delivered to your home. You know, while we're subject to the changing regulations around business operations and deliveries, we do believe they will be delivered within 2 weeks, and the delivery folks, of course, will observe distancing protocols and leave your rain barrel in your driveway. A couple other reminders, 1 garbage bag with bag tag per week of pickup and a maximum of 3 bags. We're asking people to only put out those 3 bags for 1 extra with tag because our collection folks do have to observe their own protocols around the current crisis. And it makes it very difficult for them to actually get around the whole city if there are extra large loads of garbage. So if at all possible, we're asking folks only to put out 1 extra bag of garbage with the tag on it. A reminder to residents that the COVID-19 emergency measures bylaw is in effect. This is to protect everyone's health and safety and continue the work that we're all doing to stop spread. It does prohibit any gatherings of 5 or more, and regulates the social distancing requirements we have all heard about by now. The enforcement line, which we had a presentation on earlier, is 739-4241. And another reminder, with the closure of the dog off-leash areas, please take your dogs to other parks and fields and other areas of the city. We still do have those restrictions, and lots of people use our parks. So you need folks to follow the bylaw and keep their dogs on leash. And as mentioned at General Committee earlier, there have been a few people asking about garage sales. Unfortunately, those do not work under social distancing. So please hold off your spring garage sales for a little while. We all hope we will be able to do these things very soon in the summer, but for now, please no garage sales. The last announcement is, if you are thinking of organizing any kind of community event or initiative, we do encourage you to contact the city just to understand whether or not there's any issues with enforcement. There have been a couple tremendous initiatives by local residents, but there was some aspect of it that was of concern regarding distancing. If you give us a call, we can help perhaps you to do those sorts of things in such a way that they do respect the advice of public health and the requirements of our emergency orders. With all of those announcements, I will just conclude by thanking all of the residents of Barrie, everybody who is watching and participating and following distancing. To echo the words of our CAO from a couple hours ago, we do need to keep this up for a few more weeks. That's what we are hearing at the very least, and it could be longer than that. We are still in a critical period, and everybody participating, and the fact that the calls to the enforcement line have been going down shows what a tremendous commitment the people of Barrie have to getting through this together. So thank you to everybody out there. We know it's a tough time, but we are getting through this together. Deputy Mayor Ward, the bylaw.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Elwin, that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 36.
Thank you. It is moved by Deputy Mayor Ward and seconded by Councillor Elwin that leave be granted to introduce the following bill, and this bill be read a first, second, and third time this day and finally passed. Bill 36, the confirmation bylaw. Comments or questions? Seeing none, those in favor of the confirmation bylaw, please indicate. Anybody opposed? None. That carries. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Mallis, seconded by Councillor Kunkel, and we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, members of council. To those watching at home, our next meeting is likely to be Monday, the 27th, with confirmation of that to come shortly. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.